Unemployed young Tibetans are a common sight, passing their days playing pool or listlessly watching Chinese programs in grungy TV parlors.
The problem is, unfortunately, that Tibet is not a part of China. It never has been. And the Chinese don't regard Tibetans as Chinese. Their language sounds barbaric to them, the way they dress, their religious fervor seems some fanatical and crazy to the Chinese. The Chinese person who is sent to Tibet, they have this terrible disillusioning experiences. They go up there and they say, "We come to help you." Then they look at these people and they say, "Wait a minute, you're not Chinese. Oh, you don't like me helping you. Oh, you don't even identify. We can't even talk the same language."
As evidence of China's efforts to preserve Tibetan culture, the Beijing government boasts of spending millions of dollars on the restoration of the Potala Palace. Tibetan pilgrims must stand in line and buy tickets along with foreign tourists to visit this holy site.
Potala Palace was a living monastery inhabited by human beings, which was being used daily for prayers, which is being used as a school. It was also the living quarters for the Dalai Lama, but it was also housed in many government departments. Today it is just already an amusing piece. The whole of Tibet will become like Potala Palace, just a little piece in the museum, so that people can, just sort of admire, say that, oh, once there was great civilization called the Tibetan civilization.
Tibetans are powerless to oppose what many fear may be Beijing's final solution for Tibet, a controversial multi-billion-dollar railroad which will enable China to permanently colonize and control the strategic Himalayan region.
As to the life of the Tibetans, I think the building of this railway will have a positive impact rather than a negative one. Local people will be able, for example, to get more construction material and food. It'll be good also for the local job market. So I don't see any bad things for the local people.
At a certain point, numbers simply overwhelm the indigenous people. They become marginalized. A kind of Asian apartheid occurs, in which you have a reservation group living in an impoverished condition with no education and no job prospects, surrounded by a dominant economy of colonial structure. And that's what's happening in Tibet very successfully, and it's threatening the very roots of 1,300 years of higher Tibetan civilization.
This is another form of genocide. This way, eventually the ethnic, local people will assimilate it into this newcomer, and with that the whole culture and whole sort of identity then disappear.
In 1995, the Dalai Lama identified 6-year-old Gendin Choki Nyima as the reincarnated Panchen Lama, Tibet's second most revered spiritual leader. The boy and his family disappeared within days of the Dalai Lama's announcement.
The Chinese have arrested and imprisoned the Dalai Lama's choice of Panchen Lama. He's now the youngest political prisoner in the world, isolated in Beijing under house arrest.
Chinese authorities appointed their choice of Panchen Lama. They want the Panchen Lama under their control because it is he, according to tradition, who will recognize the next incarnation of the Dalai Lama.
The fact that the Chinese insist on appointing their own candidate as the Panchen Lama shows to what lengths they will go to impose their authority over the Tibetan people. It's blatantly absurd that a Communist Party official would appoint a reincarnate Lama. To see this happening exposes the enormous gulf between the aspirations of the Tibetan people and the political will of the Chinese.
Beijing has not allowed any international agency to confirm that Gendin Choki Nyima is alive.
It's my understanding that the United Nations is supposed to look after the welfare of the world. The United Nations stands for helping defenseless nations. Why don't they help us?
Why doesn't the United Nations want to listen to the Dalai Lama, the embodiment of peace and non-violence? They want to listen to Yasser Arafat. All leaders in the world are talking about peace, but nobody is doing anything about it. Everyone is condemning violence, but nobody is doing anything to support non-violence.
Frustrated by the indifference of the United Nations, a growing number of Tibetans have begun to question the Dalai Lama's policy of strict non-violence.
Tibetans must create a whole area and a period of instability inside Tibet, to a point that no Chinese would want to immigrate to Tibet. And even the immigrants there that are living there would want to go back to China.
If we cannot demonstratively show that his path of non-violence is being given credit, that he is being respected for what he stands for, then the people can become restless. Then the people can resort into violence.
People who have always preached non-violence have realized that in this instance, non-violence is not the answer.
Our struggle is not for a piece of land, it is for a way of life. It is for a culture, it is for a civilization which teaches us that life in the form of a human being is the most precious.
I do not feel our non-violent method fail. It's a long run. Because of our non-violent, nature struggle, many Chinese now showing their sympathy and their concern.
Many people have talked to me and said, there are so many problems faced by the Chinese people. Why are you spending your time to also talk about the Tibetan issue? My answer is that this is not a question simply for the Tibetan people. This is a question for all people who see such human rights abuses. This is a problem for all of us living today on this earth.
China needs to heal its own suffering, its own humiliation, its own wound because of its brutality towards its own culture, towards its own past. In that healing process, China will recognize that Buddhism is a major spiritual resource. Once China recognizes Buddhism is an integral part of the Chinese soul, then Tibet will be a major resource for China. And Dalai Lama will be a major figure, a Chinese leader, spiritual leader, not the separatist, but someone who is able to underscore a dimension of Chinese spirituality for various reasons as Chinese have forgotten.
Now, this moment, I think we really need a genuine sense of the global responsibility based on entire humanity as same member of one human family. Your American ancestors, like Lincoln or Jefferson, I think they stood firmly on moral principle. I do not admire your weapon. I really admire your principle, democracy, freedom, and liberty. Now, your policy, I think, must guide it with these things. So, let American people's heart speak.